Imagine this, a bounty worth millions splashed across the world's news feeds. Governments whisper about special task forces. Headlines scream, "Wanted! Corruption charges! Escape justice!" The target isn't a shadowy gangster or a rogue spy. It's someone far more surprising, a billionaire whose face once appeared on glossy magazine covers, praised as a tech visionary and global investor. Meet Liang Zhao, or at least that's the name we'll use. The real identity remains buried beneath legal disputes, redacted court files, and state secrecy. Liang is the kind of figure who seems born for the headlines, self-made, charismatic, and ruthless enough to build an empire from nothing. For years, he stood at the heart of Asia's tech boom, raising billions in funding, buying up startups, and winning awards for innovation. At banquets and summits, world leaders shook his hand. Students hung on his every word about changing the future. But behind that polished image, investigators say, ran a maze of shell companies, tax havens, and secret accounts. Auditors traced money vanishing into Caribbean banks. Whistleblowers leaked files hinting at bribes to officials across several countries. By the time the alarms grew too loud to ignore, Liang's fortune had swelled past $10 billion, and the network protecting him was even bigger. As authorities in the United States, Europe, and parts of Asia launched probes, a picture emerged of a man who had turned financial sleight of hand into an art form. Prosecutors described complex offshore structures designed to hide profits from tax collectors. Regulators allege he manipulated stock prices, funneled public contracts to firms he secretly controlled, and laundered illicit earnings through luxury real estate. The scale shocked even seasoned investigators. This wasn't a lone fraudster, but someone operating at the intersection of business, politics, and international finance. Soon, arrest warrants multiplied. Interpol issued a red notice, the closest thing the world has to an official, wanted, poster. U.S. agencies froze accounts and filed indictments. European judges signed extradition requests. Journalists camped outside his former offices, trying to piece together a paper trail that spanned London, Singapore, Dubai, and Hong Kong. Yet, while the hunt intensified abroad, one thing became clear: Liang Zhao was out of reach. Reports placed him inside mainland China, moving quietly between luxury compounds and high-security hotels. Despite mounting evidence and diplomatic pressure, Chinese authorities neither confirmed nor denied his presence. They didn't extradite him, didn't prosecute him, didn't even publicly comment. Why? Because Liang, insiders suggest, isn't just a fugitive, he's an asset. His companies anchor vital sectors like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and chip design. He's rumored to possess files tying powerful figures to private deals and political donations. And, in Beijing's eyes, foreign warrants can sometimes look less like impartial justice and more like weapons in a geopolitical contest. To understand why Liang Zhao seems untouchable, you have to picture a protective wall built on three massive pillars, each one rooted deep inside China's political and economic landscape. Liang isn't just another billionaire. He's a product of decades of careful networking. Long before the international headlines and most wanted lists, he spent years cultivating relationships with provincial leaders, party officials, and regulators. He poured millions into infrastructure projects, bridges, rural schools, even hospital wings that bore his company's logo. These weren't just acts of philanthropy. They were strategic investments in loyalty. As his businesses expanded, so did his list of patrons. Some of China's most senior decision-makers have benefited, directly or indirectly, from his donations and investments. For them, Liang is more than a wealthy entrepreneur. He's part of a trusted circle whose fortunes are intertwined with the state's long-term plans. Turning him over to foreign courts wouldn't just be about losing a friend. It could risk embarrassing allies or exposing secrets that touch the highest levels of power. Then there's the sheer scale of his empire. Liang Zhao isn't sitting on a single product line. His reach stretches across industries Beijing prizes as key to its future: artificial intelligence, renewable energy, semiconductor design, electric vehicles, and advanced robotics. Many of these sectors are tied directly to China's 5- and 10-year industrial roadmaps, the blueprints for keeping its economy innovative and competitive. If authorities moved abruptly against him, they wouldn't just be punishing one man. They could disrupt supply chains, unsettle investors, and stall research programs worth billions. Some of Liang's companies employ tens of thousands of workers, supply state-backed labs, and partner with prestigious universities. In other words, his businesses are welded to national priorities. From Beijing's point of view, removing him could mean weakening a cornerstone of its tech strategy, something no government wants to do lightly, especially in the middle of global competition for technological dominance. Finally, there's the story Beijing tells, to its people and to the world, about sovereignty. Chinese officials have long bristled at the idea of outsiders dictating whom they should prosecute or extradite. "Foreign entities have no right to interfere with our judicial process," is a line repeated often in official briefings. Liang's case fits neatly into that frame. State-aligned commentators portray foreign indictments as part of a campaign to kneecap China's rise. Social media accounts sometimes describe him not as a fugitive, but as a victim of lawfare, the use of legal tools to achieve political goals. Protecting him, then, isn't only about shielding a billionaire. It's also about defending national dignity, projecting strength, and reminding citizens that China won't bow to outside pressure. Put together, these three forces form more than just a legal loophole. They're an active shield. No extradition papers signed, no domestic prosecution, no sign that diplomatic protests are changing Beijing's calculation. For now, Liang Zhao remains ensconced behind that wall, a living example of how political loyalty, economic leverage, and national pride can outweigh almost any international demand for justice. While Liang Zhao lives behind an invisible shield, frustration is boiling over in capitals across the globe. From Washington to Brussels to Canberra, officials are running out of patience. The U.S. Treasury has slapped him and his companies with multi-billion-dollar fines. European judges have signed arrest warrants and frozen luxury properties tied to his network. Governments in the Asia-Pacific, worried about investors and citizens allegedly defrauded by his ventures, have filed formal protests through diplomatic channels. Yet every time an extradition request lands on Beijing's desk, the answer is the same: no. Sometimes it's a polite note citing jurisdictional concerns. Other times silence. For foreign prosecutors, it feels like throwing darts at a stone wall. Why is China holding the line? Part of the answer lies in geopolitical leverage. Beijing understands that reputation is power. Giving up a billionaire of Liang's stature could be read as bowing to Western pressure, and that's a dangerous message at a moment when tensions are already high over trade wars, maritime disputes, and human rights accusations. By refusing to hand him over, China signals it won't let other countries dictate who it prosecutes or how it manages its own citizens. In the high-stakes game of international politics, Liang has become a pawn, or perhaps a shield, in a much larger contest for influence. Another factor is legal architecture and its gaps. China isn't bound by many of the extradition treaties that link Western nations. Even where agreements exist, they often give Beijing wide discretion. Requests can be rejected for insufficient evidence, for conflicts with domestic law, or for cases that threaten national interests. These clauses aren't accidents. They're features designed to preserve maximum flexibility. And in politically sensitive cases, that flexibility becomes an escape hatch. Foreign lawyers may insist that their dossiers are airtight, but Chinese authorities can always point to paperwork problems, procedural flaws, or simply invoke sovereignty. Then there's the information battle playing out in newsrooms and on social media. State broadcasters present Liang's story not as a criminal saga, but as proof of foreign lawfare, a campaign to hobble China's economic ascent. Commentators frame him as an unfair target singled out because of his nationality, not his alleged crimes. That framing resonates at home, especially among younger audiences proud of China's technological rise. To many, defending Liang isn't about supporting fraud, it's about rejecting bullying from abroad. This tug-of-war spills into embassies, foreign ministries, and international courts. Diplomats exchange carefully worded démarches. Legal teams draft petitions to the UN or Interpol. Journalists try to pry loose classified documents or track Liang's movements through satellite imagery and leaked flight logs. Still, despite years of maneuvering, no government has cracked Beijing's resolve. For now, Liang Zhao remains an untouchable figure in a global standoff. His case isn't just a courtroom drama, it's a pressure point in the competition between national sovereignty and cross-border justice, and neither side seems ready to blink. Beneath the bright lights, private jets, and diplomatic headlines lies a far darker layer of Liang Zhao's story, one woven from loss, betrayal, and quiet devastation. For every gala or innovation summit where he was celebrated, there are people who say they paid the price for his empire. Victims of fraud and corruption. Inside Liang's companies, some employees speak only in whispers, fearful of retaliation. They describe months of unpaid wages, bonus schemes that vanished overnight, and safety shortcuts that endangered workers. In factories once hailed as hubs of the future, protective gear went missing, ventilation systems broke, and complaints were brushed aside. Outside China, small suppliers across Southeast Asia tell eerily similar stories. They shipped raw materials, assembled components, or provided services, only to see invoices ignored or payments delayed until bankruptcy loomed. In rural towns where his projects promise prosperity, locals instead report polluted rivers, dying fish stocks, and toxic fumes from plants operating without oversight. Lawsuits and petitions rarely make it far. The defendant is too rich, too well-connected, and operating under a jurisdiction reluctant to open its doors. A few brave insiders have tried to sound the alarm. One finance director leaked spreadsheets suggesting billions siphoned through offshore accounts. An engineer documented how environmental standards were slashed to save money. But once they spoke up, the backlash came fast. Smear campaigns branding them disgruntled, travel restrictions that made leaving the country impossible, and, in some chilling accounts, sudden disappearances. Friends whisper of exit visas revoked and mysterious accidents. Whether rumor or reality, the message is clear. Exposing wrongdoing carries a terrifying cost. Across oceans, foreign investors and even state agencies claim they were duped by Liang's intricate financial schemes. They've filed civil suits and criminal complaints, only to see them stall for years in procedural dead ends. Families who lost savings or pensions to his alleged scams watch legal paperwork pile up, while their hopes for compensation fade. Parents who poured life savings into his ventures now juggle second jobs. Retirees postpone healthcare because the funds they trusted are gone. The emotional toll is immense: grief, anger, and a gnawing sense of helplessness. Perhaps the most corrosive damage isn't measured in dollars or property, it's in trust. Ordinary citizens, in China and abroad, see a glaring contrast between how swiftly minor offenders are punished and how serenely a billionaire can evade consequences. Conversations on social media hint at growing cynicism. If power protects the powerful, what is the point of laws? Scholars warn that when justice appears selective, resentment festers and faith in institutions erodes. Behind Liang Xiao's glittering biography is a mosaic of broken promises, environmental scars, and communities struggling to recover. Whether their stories ever reach a courtroom remains uncertain. What's clear is that the fallout from one man's alleged empire stretches far beyond corporate ledgers, leaving real people bearing silent wounds, while he remains cloaked in privilege and protection. So where does the saga of Liang Xiao go from here? The path ahead is anything but certain, and each possibility reads like a chapter in a political thriller. One likely scenario is a sharper, more coordinated push from abroad. Governments that have already frozen Liang's bank accounts or seized overseas mansions could go further, expanding sanctions to include executives, lawyers, or shell companies linked to him. Interpol may tighten its notices, urging member states to deny him transit and block his assets the moment they surface in foreign banks. Courts in Europe or North America could even hold trials in absentia, using them as platforms to expose the evidence and to tarnish Liang's global reputation. These moves wouldn't necessarily deliver him to a cell, but they could make the world outside China a legal minefield, shrinking the safe spaces where his fortune can operate. For someone whose empire depends on cross-border investments, shipping routes, and intellectual property deals, that pressure could bite hard. Yet the most decisive shift may come not from foreign capitals, but from Beijing itself. If the costs of shielding Liang start to outweigh the benefits, Chinese authorities could quietly pull back their protection. History shows that political winds can change quickly when scandals threaten economic stability or tarnish the leadership's image. If workers protest unpaid wages or investors inside China complain about losses, the narrative of Liang as a patriotic entrepreneur could crumble. Regulators might open audits, prosecutors could pursue domestic irregularities, and state media might pivot, recasting him as a cautionary tale rather than a national asset. In China's political ecosystem, loyalty is prized. Another route lies in the gray world of diplomacy. Behind closed doors, officials could craft a face-saving deal. Perhaps Liang submits to questioning in a neutral jurisdiction, or agrees to pay hefty settlements while avoiding prison time. Foreign governments might promise not to politicize the proceedings, while China could present the outcome as proof of its commitment to fairness. Alternatively, Liang could simply fade from public view, stepping down from boards, transferring shares to state-linked funds, and retreating into private life. For all sides, such an arrangement would allow them to claim victory without the spectacle of extradition or trial. And then, there's the simplest, if least dramatic, ending: nothing changes. Liang may spend years living in guarded compounds, enjoying comfort, but always aware that one political shakeup could leave him exposed. Like other high-profile figures before him, he could remain wealthy yet isolated, his passport useless, his movements restricted to safe territory. The story of Liang Xiao isn't a simple crime drama. It's a high-stakes thriller playing out on the world stage. China protects him not merely because of wealth, but because he's a nexus of political loyalty, economic strategy, and national pride. For nations chasing justice, every legal victory is tangled in complexity. For the powerless, every failed extradition erodes faith in fairness. Will truth and justice win in the end? Or will power continue to bend the scales? Stay tuned, because whatever happens, this story is far from over.